Hi, welcome to the Loki podcast. My name is Johnny Ball from Present Influence. I'm joined today by a very special guest. We have Stephanie Scheller with us. Stephanie is a professional speaker for 5 years or more now. She has her own podcast, which is called Black Belt Selling. She is a TEDx speaker, as well as having been nominated for numerous business awards, including the Forbes 30 Under 30 last year. And she is an expert in sales training, with also have several best-selling books under her belt as well. Stephanie, welcome to the Loki podcast.
Thank you for having me. I love this topic of influence and persuasion, and I mean, this is my jam. I get excited about it. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
It's one of my most interesting areas as well, one that always gets me G'd up in a similar kind of way, because for me, when I first sort of discovered all this hidden influence and stuff that was going on, my mind expanded, and I need to know more about this. I guess you were similar as well.
I was, as a kid, I would sit there and you would hear about all of the experiments people were doing with marketing, like the subliminal messaging, right? And how subliminal messaging was banned because it was so influential. So it was, they're not supposed to do it, but they're still doing it, right? We're still influencing people subliminally all the time. And I realized that if they're doing this, I want to understand it, because I want to know when I'm being influenced as much as humanly possible, so that I can make a decision, right? Make a solid decision, a smart decision. So I've been obsessed with this since I was 10, 11 years old. Like, this has always been something that I've been like, that's kind of cool. I wonder how you do that. I wonder how does this work? So, yeah.
It runs that kind of fine line between influence and mind control, and I think that maybe is why it's kind of intriguing for me, and maybe yourself as well. I can remember all those stories about that they were hiding subliminal messages in TV things, even if it was just as benign as go buy popcorn or something like that. But
right, yeah.
But studies that I've seen since then suggested that doesn't necessarily work in the way that they thought it might, and also that it really only had an effect on a small percentage of people that were, so it was hard to gauge at best. So that is kind of interesting, but still there are so many other things and aspects, and there are subliminal or subconscious ways of influencing people. Other than the sort of being fascinated by that, how did you get into that in terms of sales training and understanding more about the psychology of influence?
My first job out of college, I got a job in sales. It was not supposed to go that way. My degree, I got this really expensive degree in equine business and facility management. So I was going to go run a horse barn. But I found out, I went to school in Ohio, and Ohio is on the northern side of the US, and it's cold. It's cold there. It snows. I'm Texas born and raised. It's warm. I'm wearing long sleeves today. It's like in the 60s. I'm cold. So snow and I did not get along. And when I graduated, I had this realization of oh my gosh, if I am going to get paid enough money to pay off my loans, if I want to do this to get paid that kind of money, because I needed $40,000 a year, I was going to have to stay up north, because all the barns, all the facilities down south did not pay that kind of money. So I was going to have to stay in the north. And I just kind of looked around and said, yeah, I'm not up for this. So I came back down south, and I was looking for a plan B, and I got this job as a sales rep. And I was doing it, and I did well in sales. But I really believe the only reason I did well in sales is because I have this super persuasive, bubbly personality. People like talking to me. They like having conversations with me. And I worked really hard. I was running 20 appointments a week some weeks, which, 20, 25, it was nuts how hard I was working to get 2 sales, 3 sales a week. And so when there was a point, I went to my manager, because my mom, who's a small business owner, came to me and said, hey, I'm getting this sales training. This stuff is genius. And at that point in time, I didn't even know there was a thing called sales training. I just had no clue. And I I go to my boss and I said, hey, my mom's been working with this sales trainer. He's coming into the area and he's offered to come in and do a free hour of sales training for our office. You know, would you guys be open to him coming in? And my boss looked at me and he goes, we don't do, no. Sales trainers are scammers. Stay away from those guys.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, sales trainers are scammers. Oh my gosh. Well, you know, fast forward another year and the company ended up making some big mistakes with my paycheck and finding excuses to not pay me commission checks and all kinds of craziness. And I ended up out in California, learning how to start a sales training business because I had no other option really. Like I literally went from, you know, making a $3,000 commission check a month to making no commission check a month with no warning, no heads up, no nothing. Just my commission check just went, and they were like, oh yeah, you're not getting a commission check anymore. And so I'm sitting here going, what do I do? Like, I kind of count on that money. So I ended up starting a sales training business, built it from scratch, had replaced my full-time income in less than 5 months, and walked away and ran a sales training business, built it up to be the largest, most active practice in Central Texas. And then realized I wasn't so much into sales training in general as I was into working with small businesses. So I made a transition away from that, but I guess that wasn't really a short story. That was the long story of how I got into sales training.
I can imagine it could be longer, but yeah, it's fine. And it gives us a nice idea of your journey to go into that. But what actually made you pick sales training then from there?
I was good at sales. I thought I was good at sales. I was the number 2 sales rep. We were the number 1 division in the country for this company. So I thought I was good at sales. I realize now I was really just good at like working hard, but I thought I was good at sales. And it was the opportunity. I mean, so what happened was September 2013, I didn't get a commission check. That was the first month I didn't get a commission check. And I literally, I logged into my bank account the morning I was supposed to get my commission check and it wasn't there. And I show up to work and I'm like, what's going on? They're like, oh yeah, sorry. And it was 8 months of them saying, well, we're going to get you a new commission plan. Oh, nope. Sorry. Never mind. Yep, we are. Nope. Yep. Nope. And so what had happened was they'd finally rolled out a new commission plan. Everyone was supposed to get commission this month. This was March 2014. And my boss texts me and says, hey, heads up, you're not getting a commission check again. And I just had like a meltdown. And I was at a client's office. I excused myself. I walked out into the parking lot. I'm crying. And I called my mom. Because I'm like, at this point, I'm 20-something years old. I didn't know what else to do. So I call my mom and I'm just crying to her. And it was literally chance. She was like, Stephanie, I am flying out to California next month to go to the sales training boot camp on how to start a sales training practice. It's a family ticket. You're coming with me. You're going to start a sales training business and you're walking away from those guys. And that was literally, and I was like, okay, I could do this. I can sell. If I go to this boot camp on how to run this business, I can do this. And so that was what I did. So it was literally, it was just like the perfect, everything came together the right way. So
had it not happened quite like that, who knows
right.
where it might have gone. I find so much of life is like that. It's like sometimes one small decision or something just happening at a certain time allows things to go a certain way, and who knows where it might have ended up had that not been the case. Well, thankfully this is the path you took, and so we're here now speaking today. What were some of the things that you discovered? Because it's interesting to me that you're saying that you were already naturally a warm and happy and smiley personality, and well, of course, and that's very much the impression I get as well. And you now understand the importance of likability in terms of sales and influence and persuasion, right? So you already had that as a natural gift yourself. Did you when you learned how important likability was, did you ramp that up or look for ways to turn it up more?
I did. So I have this warm personality, this bubbly personality. My now husband, at the time boyfriend, would also joke. He'd be like, I could tell when you're, really needing a sale because you dress very attractively. And I'm like, not sure what that means. So that was never intentional. As much as he thinks it was, it was never intentional like that. But once I learned, because my issue is when I would get into the sales appointment, I showed up, we had a sales appointment set. So I'm showing up with my book, I'm sitting down, and I'm like going into the pitch. I'm like, all right, like, I'm here to pitch you. I know I'm here to pitch you. Like, I would just go straight into the pitch. And so what happened, one of the big things for me, so while I was working for that corporate job, I was a sales rep for them for a year. At the end of the year, they came to me and said, hey, would you be willing to take over our retention team? Our retention numbers are abysmal. Like 16, 12% retention, and literally you are the retention. Like, your accounts are the only accounts that are making it to the 1 year mark. And I was like, oh, really? So that's crazy. So I switched to this retention role. And so when I left the sales role, there were some deals that I've been working on, and I tried to close them out before I switched. Didn't work out. So I switched to the retention role. And 3 weeks later, a new account comes across my desk. So to explain this one, it takes 2 weeks for an account to go live, which means for something to cross my desk 3 weeks after I switch, it means somebody called someone the week I switched, closed the deal, and got it processed. Okay. This account crosses my desk, and it's one of the accounts that I tried so hard to close out before I switched. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the account going, what the heck? How did this happen? I worked on this account for 8 months. I worked so hard trying to close this deal. So I go and I track down the sales rep who sold it, and I pinned him down in the kitchen. He's in the kitchen getting a cup of coffee. I walked in and I blocked the doorway. And I was like, hey, Cedro, so I saw you got Martha's Restaurant. And he goes, yeah. You just warmed them up for me. They were ready to close. And I was like, no, they weren't. I met with them 3 times trying to close them. Leading up to the transition over, they would never buy. I worked on them for 8 months. What the heck? What happened? And he goes, oh, it was a timing thing. He's making all kinds of excuses, right? And I'm like, no, what happened? And he goes, well, don't take this personally. And I was like, what? He goes, I was like, he goes, they just didn't feel like they could trust you. Like they felt like, all you ever did was show up and want to talk about the program. And they, they just didn't like you as much. And it was like this slap in the face and this realization that you have to prioritize that a lot more than I did. Mm. You have to spend time getting to know people and building that relationship and being likable. And it was a very hard wake-up call, a very, that was tough to sit there and just having got a promotion. I'm running a team now, and to be told,
some quite strong feedback, and so you need maybe a bit of time to process and be with that and make peace with it. It was like, okay, let's start to look at how you can use it. But wow. It's making me kind of think of how people often show up in business networking situations as well, right? And when I first started getting into having my own business, and people said, you have to go and network. So I started going to chambers of commerce meetings, and I started going to whatever networking things I could find. And this is a pre-meetup kind of thing as well. And And what I generally found was it was mostly people thrusting business cards in my face and trying to either get a sale or a referral. They wanted one or the other, and it was like if you couldn't provide either, you were no use.
Yeah. And they get
yeah.
so dismissive. I mean,
Right.
we're going to talk about body language today, right? You can watch their body language shut down. Their feet turn. They're no longer interested in you. Their voice goes flat, and they're just like, they stop asking interested questions. And that hasn't changed. I don't know if you've done much networking recently. I avoid.
Well, I do, and I aim for better networks. So I aim for more social networks in terms not online so much, but in person. So, for example, the business network that I'm a part of now that I joined last year is much more of a we come together socially. You don't get your business cards out at the table unless somebody asks you for your card. And you're not promoting your business. You get 2 minutes each to introduce yourself and to say what you're about. And other than that, we're just talking and having a conversation.
Yeah.
So when people come into that and they're just like, push my business, get a sale, get a client, come and have a strategy session, come and test my products. It doesn't fit in that environment. And that's the kind of networking environment that I want to be in, because I actually want to get to know people. I'm far more likely to buy or recommend somebody who I like, who is a friend in my network. And that's how I view networking now. That for me was I discovered that business networking can be like that more often. That's great. That's the kind of networking I want to do. When it's a business card thrust in your face, no thanks. I don't really want that.
No, I always joke. I'm like, I don't play business card bingo. I get invited to networking events all the time, and I'm like, I don't play business card bingo anymore. And everyone kind of laughs. They're like, what's business card bingo? I'm like, where you just go out and try and collect the most business cards and see if you can get, 5 in a row. Like no, stars don't align like that. And the funny thing, I've gone to networking events. If I go to a networking event, I get a client out of it pretty much every time, even if it's those really crappy networking events, just because of who I am, how I show up, my elevator pitch is really strong. Like, I get clients out of it. But what I've discovered is that they are not the clients I enjoy working with. They're almost always problem clients. And I'm the kind of person that if you're a problem client and I want you to disappear, I will refund your money so that I can give you the boot. And so I found I was doing work to end up refunding the money because they were a pain in the butt and I didn't want to work with. So I was just like, yeah, this is not worth it. Not worth it.
Yeah. So my business has been mainly coaching and consulting, although I do more training now, although mine's more around public speaking and influence skills, not specifically in training. And in the same kind of thing, I am not going to work with someone who I don't feel is a good fit. And I learned that lesson in my earlier days of coaching, from thinking it was about me, but trying to make it work or make it fit. And you do, especially in earlier days, you think, I need the business, I need the work, I can deal with it, I can put up with the crap from these people whilst I'm trying to make this work, whilst I get myself set up. But really, generally, it's just never worth it, and it eats up a lot of time and energy that you would be far better off putting into getting a new client, fire them in, and get somebody better to work with. So now, the sort of whether meeting to discuss whether we can work together or not, why they want to work with me and how I can best help them, is also at the end of it. I say at the start, at the end of the meeting, I'm going to tell you as well whether I think we're a good fit and we can continue to work. And if the answer is no, I will try and direct you to someone who I think would be a good fit for you. But if the answer is yes, then we'll move on to the next step. And it's so much better, so much mentally healthier, and it also saves a lot of time.
It does. Well, and so I'm on this new crusade now. I've just decided this over the past couple of weeks that, energy is your greatest asset, and you've got to protect your energy, right? Time is important too, but I hear a lot of people talk about time's your greatest asset. It's your greatest resource. You can't get more time. You can get more money. You can't get more time. But I really think that energy is, because if you have, I'm going to take 2 seconds to go to talk about this one, and then we'll get back on track. But if you have time, we've all had a time where you had an evening stretching before you and you had no energy to do anything with it. So was that time really valuable?
Mm.
Not really. So you have to protect your energy. And when you're pouring energy, your energy needs to go into places that renew that energy, right? And so if you're pouring energy into a client that is just sucking you dry, the problem is not only is there the lost time there, but now you have to go spend time rejuvenating your energy so that you can actually have the energy to go after the clients you want.
Yeah.
So the actual loss of taking on those clients is just astronomical, and people don't recognize it. They don't own it. And it just drives me nuts, drives me absolutely crazy.
No, I agree. And it usually is a lesson I think people learn from bad experiences rather than in advance. And so if anyone's listening and hasn't yet had that experience, see if you can learn this in advance, because it really sucks to go through that and have to figure it out for yourself. So figure out, work with people who you really want to work with. And if you get a sense that someone's going to be a real pain in the ass for you, get rid of them, move on. Life's too short. Good advice, really good advice. So I'm glad to touch on that. Now, in your experience as a sales trainer, what do you think, I mean, other than the likability factor, what are some of the other key areas that people need to learn about and consider to become better at influencing others? Because, I mean, on some level, we're all kind of in sales. We all have to sell ideas or something or other, persuade other people in life. So this is good for everybody, not just people who work in sales.
Yeah, and I think, so one of the things to keep in mind, I think, influence is part of your likability, right? How well you do influence plays into how likable you are, right? If you're over the top, you're arm twisting, right? You're forcing people to do stuff. Your influence, I would rate your influence at like a 1, or maybe can we go negative? Like, that's not influence at that point.
Right.
And your likability score drops as well. So I think the two are like tied together. And I think one of the really important things is, speech patterns and your voice. So I remember this one time, first time I realized that this actually mattered. Going back to when I use a lot of my own stories because there's a lot of things I screwed up. And I'm like, let's learn from what I did wrong. So hopefully you don't have to. But so when I got started in sales, I had a really rockin' first 2 weeks. I closed like quadruple quota in 4 weeks. My first 2 weeks, everyone's like losing it. The next 6 weeks, I closed nothing, like literally nothing. My bosses are all freaking out. They're like, what is going on? And so towards the end of the 6 weeks, my manager rides along with me, right? So he gets in the car. I set an appointment. We go out to meet with this one lady, and she's sitting across the table from us. It was an AC company. And she's sitting across the table, and she just sits there, and you can't see she's got her hands folded in front of her on the desk. She's very prim. She's very proper. She talks very much like this, very calm, very measured. And of course, me being me, knowing that I need the sale. And the only thing I knew at this point about sales was when I got excited and passionate, people tend to be more likely to buy in. And if I could get them excited, they would buy in too. So I'm sitting there across from her. My manager's sitting next to me, and I'm doing the presentation. And the quieter and more withdrawn she gets, the more excited and bigger and just broader. And I just start talking faster. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is such an awesome, like I'm going off on this poor lady. And we get to the end of the presentation. And of course, I'm like, so what do you think? And she sits there and she takes the sheet and she's flipping through it very quietly, very calmly, not saying anything. So I'm like, so we could, and my boss leans over and he steps on my foot. And I'm like, okay, not sure what that meant, but clearly he wants me to shut up. And so I was very quiet. We finished the presentation, obviously did not get the deal, but we get in the car driving back and he said, Stephanie, okay, first of all, after you ask for the close, the first person to speak loses, which I'm going to address that terminology in just a second here. But he says the first person to speak loses. Either, you got to let them be the first person to speak. I said, okay. He said the other thing is salespeople need to be chameleons. You were way overpowering her with your energy. She felt completely run over by you. There's no way she was going to make the decision to buy because you took her power away. And so it was, and he didn't say it quite that eloquently because that wasn't his style, but that's, the Stephanie interpretation of it.
Sure.
But that was the first time I realized when you're talking to someone, the way you talk, your voice is an instrument. Your voice is one of your greatest assets, and body language and all that comes into play too. But you've got to be very conscious about what you do with your voice, what you do with your body language, and you want to match what they're doing, right? So whoever you're talking to, if you come in, if you want to get someone excited, the way to do that is so let's say they're at a level 5 energy and you want to get them to level 7 energy. Well, you don't go to level 7 energy. You go to a level 5.5 energy and they'll come along with you. Now you can go to level 6 energy and you bring them along. Now you can go to level 6.5, right? And notice I didn't even go 5, 6, 7, right? You want to move them along in small increments. Same the other way. Let's say you're talking to someone and they come in and they're bubbling, they're excited, they're going off, they're just all over the place. And you're like, I need you to focus. Well, instead of you sitting there and you trying to deflate them, which is once again going to take away their feeling of power, right? When someone doesn't feel like they have a choice in their energy level, when they feel like they have to match you or be overpowered by you, you take away their sense of control. And when people feel like they're out of control, they don't like to make buy-in decisions. And buy-in decisions can be, whatever you want. So your buy-in decision could be buying into the idea. It could be buying into doing the dishes for your spouse because they asked. Your buy-in decision can be whatever. And so you have to learn to match them. So someone comes in and they're bubbling, you're like, give them a minute of you being bubbly too, right? Show them that you're following them, and then you start to scale it back. So they're at a 5, you need to get them to a 3. You say, oh my gosh, hey, it's so good to see you. How's your day going? That's awesome. How about your week? What's the highlight of your week? It sounds like something cool has happened, and let them talk. And then you go, okay, all right, so let's go ahead and get focused here, and let's work on this. Okay? All right, great. So notice I brought it down just a little bit. And then you go, okay, so I would say that would bring it down maybe a 4, 4.5. All right, so let's talk through this. So I've got the paperwork, and you just slowly bring them down to the level. And it's about, your speech patterns. How fast are you talking? How short are your sentences, right? If I'm talking really fast and I'm really excited, all of my sentences tend to be really short and choppy, and that's okay. That's what we do when we're excited because our brain starts firing and we have a hard time keeping up. So that's cool. And as you slow things down, it's much easier to speak in full, complete sentences, longer sentences that make more sense, right? If you were to write up that too or get those transcribed, you'd have a bunch of periods in the first one, maybe a bunch of exclamation marks. The second one, you'd have semicolons and hyphens and parentheses and, totally different sentence structure, right? So when I talk about speech patterns, it's changing the lilt of your voice, the energy levels of your voice, and your body language, but talking primarily about voice. But it's also changing how you arrange the sentences that come out of your mouth as well, because that influences the energy and the interest that other people will bring.
Right.
So
now some people do these things more or less naturally.
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes I felt when I was learning neurolinguistic programming and things along these sorts of lines that when it gets explained to you, you stop doing it naturally because you are trying to do it consciously, something that you do unconsciously, something you just naturally do without having to think about it. It's kind of pre-programmed. And the pace and lead thing that you're describing of going to where they are and then leading them into either a higher energy or a lower energy is super important. I can see exactly why it's important in sales, in meetings, in one-to-one. It's especially important in public speaking, right, as well. But there's some differences there. I have an idea of what those differences are, but for you as a public speaker yourself, what would be the difference when you want to lead the energy of a bigger group?
Really, really good question. So it's really a couple of things I've learned to do. One, whoever is introducing me, I've got to get them. So I have to come in at a really high energy level on stage, because whatever energy level I come in at, it can't be over the top, but it needs to be high, right? So perfect example, yesterday I was speaking at an event, and I wanted to make sure that whoever introduces you will make or break you, right? So if you get on stage and you are introduced by someone who, like, I've got a really great speaker bio that we've, spent a lot of time putting together, making sure it flows, making sure the impact is just right, the periods. But if I can give that to people and they have butchered the whole thing, and they're just like, Stephanie Scheller is an accomplished speaker and author who, and they just blow the whole, right? The audience is so disengaged. So I always make sure, who's introducing me, and I want to go have a conversation with them. And I want to make sure I'm doing the leading energy thing, right? So whatever level they're at, I meet them there, and then I lead them to whatever energy level I want them at on stage. So if I need to come out on stage at a 9, right? Rarely are you going to come out on stage at a full on 10. 10 to me is like, like, not often are you going to run out on stage that way.
Even Tony Robbins doesn't run out on stage like that, right? First away, right away.
Right. So it's just too much. And if you go out at that level, right, that's too far away, because your audience is sitting, right, in a stage setting. They're sitting in their chair. They're at like a level 4. You come out at a 10, you're 6 points above. You're not gonna catch them. But if I need to come out at like a 9 or an 8 in order to really get things going, I want whoever introduces me on stage to be coming out. Let's say the audience is at a 4, lower energy level. I want the person who introduces me on stage to be at a 6 or a 6, like a 6.5, right? So I make sure that I lead them to that energy level when I'm talking with them, and I get them excited. And I talk about how excited I am to be here, to be talking to these guys, and how much I love doing this. And this is my passion. And by the way, I can't thank you enough for introducing me. And it just means the world to me. Did you get the chance to look over the bio? Does it make sense? Are you good? Do you need anything from me? Can I get you? Do you want a drink of water? And they're just sitting and they're like blown away. They're like, the speaker is offering to get me a drink of water? What the heck? But then they go out on stage, right? And the lady goes out on stage yesterday and she goes, how are you guys doing? Right? And I'm the after lunch speaker, which means everyone is
always tough.
Oh man. So she comes out, how's everyone doing? Good.
Digesting our food.
Right? And she's like, no. Y'all, you got to give me more energy before I bring this person out on stage. You are not going to believe it. But she goes out and she does such a great intro and gets everyone fired up. And then when I come out on stage, I'm cracking jokes. I'm giving stuff away. I'm high energy. I'm moving around. I'm making a lot of eye contact, talking a little bit faster, and I'm making jokes about the fact that I'm Italian and I talk fast and I use my hands. By the way, let me tell you this story of this time where my mom, who's full-blood Italian, was telling a story, and 2 of us kids decided to be prankful, and we walk over, and we hold her hands down by her side, and she couldn't talk. She just sat there, and she sputtered, and you guys, right? And everyone laughs, and it gives me the chance to transition from that really high energy into a little bit lower energy, right? Going from talking fast into that slower. And I say, all right, so we're going to have fun. I'm going to crack jokes, right? You can't stay at super high energy the whole time, but you got to come out high energy when you're talking to a group full of people. And then, I scaled back the energy to maybe a 7 throughout the rest of the presentation. And that's perfect.
For me, that when I talk, usually I look to make sure that there is a range of emotional levels within what I'm talking about, because make it appropriate to what you're actually saying and what you're actually doing and what you want to get from the people who are listening to you. But also anything that's done on just one level all the way through is going to be tedious.
It is, yeah, and people disengage and they disconnect, and it's monitoring the levels too. So we had a moment in the presentation where I did an exercise with this one lady, and it's a very emotional exercise, and she got really emotional. And she started crying, and she's like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Right, and the room's just very quiet. Everyone can feel it, right? They can feel that she is, she's passionate about this. She's overwhelmed. She can't even talk because she's so passionate. And, so I let the moment. So one thing I'll see people do is they'll cut the moment off when they feel like it's getting into that range. You want people to experience that. You want them to have the full emotional range. Because again, you don't want, if I were to cut off the emotion there, right? Again, it makes people feel like they're losing control, right? You want to naturally lead them through it. So I let that moment pass, and I just looked at her and I said, "I want to thank you for being willing to come up here, for being willing to be vulnerable. You got a lot of value out of this. We just designed your entire marketing message because you were willing to do that. And that means a lot to me." And I looked at the audience and I said, "What do you guys think? I mean, that was pretty amazing to see, right?" And everyone's like, "Yeah." And I was like, can we give her a round of applause for that one? Right. So you get everyone moving, and it brings the energy back up. So they have the chance to experience that. You really can't stay at a 9 the whole presentation. You will wear people down, but you gotta start at a higher level, because you can scale it back. It's harder to scale it up, right? Thinking about first impressions, it's harder to scale up than it is to scale back.
For me, this is a really interesting area, because being someone who's not only working in public speaking, but also actively involved with Toastmasters International, it is one of the things I see people struggle with the most in learning public speaking skills, of actually having a range of energy in it. And Toastmasters will pick people up on vocal variety, which I guess is one of the ways they really introduce that. Like, well, if you're changing your voice, you're going to be changing some of the emotional level, and it's not that it isn't just going a bit high and low and using a full range of your voice. That's important, but actually having, like you say, speeding up, slowing down, and maybe even going a bit quiet sometimes where it's appropriate, or going really loud when it may. And that is a flexibility that doesn't get taught in those arenas. Some trainings will teach it, but generally comes from people getting more comfortable with having greater emotional flexibility. And I do think that, for me, that's a key part of influence and persuasion on any level, is having the emotional flexibility to go where you need to go without worrying about how people are seeing you.
Yeah, and I think, so that's a really good point. I actually want to touch on something that I just learned about a couple of weeks ago. So it is about the highs and the lows in the voice, but I want to say, and I'm sure you've got some other women who listen to this podcast. One of the things we learned, we had this really amazing speaker come into our event 2 weeks ago, and she was talking about how one of the things women don't realize is that men, so she said, think about your dog, right? If you ever does anyone have a dog? And of course, a handful of people. She goes, has your dog ever gone off barking at something random and you're just like, dude, there's nothing there? She's like, your dog hears things on a higher register than we do. So your dog actually heard something, you just didn't, right? She said, guys are actually the opposite. So they have a lower register. And so a lot of times she's like, women, have you ever said something to your husband and he just didn't seem to hear it? She's like, it's not always them ignoring you. She said, sometimes women actually talk at a pitch that is high enough that it makes it difficult for men to hear.
And so,
right, exactly. So it's using, like, I like how you went into, it's not just about going high and low with your voice. Right? You can go high and low, but first of all, be careful about going too high for the women, because it can make it hard for the men in your audience to hear you. But it's about the resonance. It's about, one, talking from your gut, really speaking from that core place. It's about talking slower when you really want to make a point. And it's about speeding it up and moving things along when you want people to get excited. And it's about louder and softer and all of those key pieces that play together. I really do think every public speaker should study some musical instrument at some point in time, because you have to learn all of those pieces for a musical instrument.
Now that's interesting.
And
yeah.
it helps you understand that your voice truly is.
I have a musical background, and I had never really related the two. I play piano and a few other instruments, and had really never made that kind of connection. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think when I think about it, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. With music, you really have to, if you want to be great at playing music, you really have to get into the emotion and the flow of the music, the crescendos, the low parts, the where it goes staccato or speeds up or slows down. You have to be able to go with all of that flow, and I love that. As I'm going to use that at some point in my speaking, I'm sure. One of the things that I just wanted to quickly mention, because I assume that you are speaking more or less in your natural register.
Mm-hmm. Now currently, yes.
Yeah, so a lot of women do have, as you mentioned, a naturally higher register. Their voices are more high pitched, and one of the things that has become apparent to me, and I'm sure you're already aware of this, is for that when women want to, especially in a business environment, want to be taken more seriously or have something serious to say, that it, maybe it shouldn't, but it does make a bigger difference to how seriously they're taken if they can bring their voice down as low as they can without it getting ridiculously low, but as lower, into a lower register, because for some reason, even for guys, talking a bit of a lower register or a deeper voice adds more gravitas, more impact to what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's not about trying to be a guy or not embracing what makes you a woman, because I could totally see someone taking this the wrong way and being like, well, men just need to take us. That's not what this is about, right? This is about the fact that we want to be equal opportunity. You're talking to a mixed gender audience. You've got to understand that physically, men don't hear the higher pitched when you're talking up here quite as well. They really resonate and connect with the lower resonance, and women do too. We take the lower stuff seriously. Taking it back to music, right? What happens in the serious moments of the movie? The music becomes slower and darker and deeper, and we go into a minor key, right? That's just how our brains are wired. This isn't about guys or girls. This is about how is the brain wired and making the most out of that, becoming your best influential part. So I wanted to touch on that because I could totally see someone going off on,
people are so often looking for things to get upset about online these days. So I'm glad you made that qualification. And it would be just as true for there are men who have a naturally higher register as well. That if they want to be taken a bit more seriously, just bring it down, bring it lower, slow it down, bring it lower. And for anyone, even if your register is a fairly normal level, it's going to make a difference. It is that emotional variety, but one of the things we're talking about particularly is influence and persuasion, and probably one of the areas where most people listening are interested in making that impact is things like having things you say make an impact or drop in, or have that thing that you really want them to remember or take away needs to be said with enough impact and heard in the right way as well.
And it doesn't have to be outside of what feels natural for you, but at the same time, so you want to go where you do feel comfortable, because we pick up when people are not authentic. We pick up on that and we tend to disengage from that pretty quickly. So don't necessarily go somewhere that's inauthentic for you, but at the same time, look to just take yourself into that lower portion of what is comfortable, what is your register. And the more you build that knowledge, right? So I play the violin, and the more you practice, the easier it becomes to play on the E string or the G string, both of which are actually a little bit more complicated to play on because they require different levels of pressure, different levels of bow control, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Different placements of the arm. So the more you do it, the easier it is to go into the E string or the higher register, or the G string, the lower register. So
because there are times when you want to take the energy up, where you want to make things a bit lighter, and then you take your voice up higher, and you maybe go a bit lighter and fluffier. It is having that variety. So we talked a fair bit about how we speak, and one of the things that we said we try and touch on today is also what to say, the word choices.
Yeah. I think this is as important. And so we're adding layers in, right? So what I would recommend people do if they're listening to this, especially if they're listening to this for like the first time, is don't try and rewrite everything today. Start with your speech patterns. Start practicing, owning the speech patterns, your voice, all that stuff, and then go into worrying about the word choice, right? These are different layers that you can add in.
This is like years of experience coming into a podcast here. So it's like, it's not going to happen in a few hours.
People all the time are like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just like in the movies, where people have like a little earbud and like, they're like, can I just have you in my ear? I'm like, does it really work that way? But if you practice, you can build the same skill sets. But word choice is huge. So I have seen, you think about what you do. So example of yesterday, I had a couple of people were putting on this really hyper exclusive 10-person only retreat. I've had a whole bunch of people who are like, oh my gosh, I really want information on this. And I had a handful of them who I texted yesterday and was like, hey, we need to meet. We have to have everyone registered by Wednesday of next week. So let's meet. And I had several people who just texted back and said, what's the price? Okay. So here's a word choice, right? We have eliminated speech patterns completely at this point because they're trying to text with me. I'm trying to get them on the phone. So I text back and say, it will be easier to chat over the phone if you can. Give me a few minutes and I'll type up something and send it over. So the word choice there is I'm acknowledging what you asked for. I'm letting you know what my preference is. I'm also letting you know I'm going to honor your request, but I'm going to give you the chance to take me up on my offer, which is the in-person or the over the phone first. So I sent them that text. Then I follow up with another text. And I could have gone straight into, well, it's $8,500 for a one-day event, right? And that's a big turnoff, right? That's no one's going to be like, oh yeah, here you go, Steph. Here's my card. Go ahead and run that. So instead, what I did was I walked them through. So, first and foremost, one, this is what I would typically say over the phone. I'm going to try and keep it short via text so that you don't have to read a dissertation. But I do want to really thank you for being interested in this. It means a lot to me. These events are really important to me. And I'm going, like, this is literally the text I'm sending them. And then I say, so a couple of quick details that will help explain why we've priced this where we have. Because it is not a cheap event. But we don't do cheap events. Cheap events are pitch fests. This is a valuable event. What we have put together is a one-day, ultra-exclusive, hyper-luxurious retreat. We will rent out an estate just for the attendees. We will pick you up from the airport, and once we pick you up, once you land, we will take care of everything you need till you leave. You will not have to spend another penny. We will have a private chef. And I start going into, and I'm listing out what all they get. And then at the end, I say, so for all of this, it will be $8,500. We can break it out into a couple of payment plans. I'll call you tomorrow morning just to go over the details again and see if you have any questions. So that does word choices here, does a couple of things. One, I just don't slap them across the face with a massive price point. Okay. Two, I'm giving them a couple of keywords that really appeal to this particular audience. Ultra exclusive, hyper luxurious, right? They are like, oh, that sounds really nice, right? We're calling it a workcation, not a retreat, not a vacation. It's a workcation, right? So choosing words that have these emotional connections, right? I can't call it a vacation because they're going to be working, okay? But vacations has a completely different association with it than a retreat or a work event. And so calling it a workcation, we're going to get you in a hot tub. We got fire pit. We're going to have all this fun stuff. Makes it less about, like, it doesn't make them afraid of being interested in this event. Because a lot of times people are afraid to be interested in an event because they're afraid they're going to get overwhelmed or overworked. So we take that out of the equation right away just with word choice. Workcation, ultra exclusive, hyper luxurious. Just eliminate that concern. Right
I'm
off
hearing
the
that
bat.
and I'm thinking, yeah, I want to know more. Yeah. It's good.
Right. That's so your word choice. And then I'm trying to think of an example. I will often end up rewriting my emails before I send them because I look it over and I'm like, it's phrased a little negatively. Like it's kind of coming across, like for example, I don't say stuff like, well, we don't do that. Okay. We don't do that. That's negative. Don't. Like and that shuts down the conversation. I never want to shut down the conversation. So instead I'll say, that's a really great idea. And we looked into that. Here are the challenges we found with fulfilling that. So here's what we offered instead. That's a totally different conversation. And again, that's word choice. We don't do that, shuts down. We're over. What I said with we don't do that is your idea is stupid and I'm not giving you any merit. That's, no one wants to hear that.
It's interesting. I mean, one of the things we talked about this is a third podcast I've recorded this week. It's a busy recording week this week, so it's good. But one of the things that's come up on both of the previous podcasts that I've recorded with other guests has been this issue of people using some of the tools of influence and persuasion negatively, like fake scarcity. Like things like saying, well, there's only a limited time to buy this, or we'll only take this many people. And like, well, for me, as I know from experience now and from having seen so many people do things that way, if I'm ever going to say that there really is only space for 10 people in this program, there is only going to be 10 people in that program. It's like, well, we might do a waiting list for the next one, but there is only going to be 10 people in this program. Because I personally, with integrity, hate that fake scarcity stuff. And yet so many people are doing it. And like one of the ones that gets pointed out a lot now online is people just putting a 7 at the end of the price. Now I've been in trainings where that gets taught as well, where that's been taught as like when you do your fake price contrast of normally it would be this much, but today it's this much, and it's just something ending in 7, wherever it was before, and it's really cheesy when you know the structure, when you know how they organize it. And I have to be honest, I have even taught that because I thought that at one point in my earlier days, because I thought that's how you were supposed to do it. And it was only from having negative experiences and from understanding more of it, like, oh no, that's crass. It's cheesy and it's a bit fake as well. So let's just be a bit more honest about it.
And the problem is that 1, it did work for a long time, and 2, it does still work on some people.
It does.
But again, like those are usually the people who are not the savvy buyers. I will say there is value in having, if you're doing it in writing, like on a landing page or on a website, having something that is, $14.97 versus $1,500.
Sure, but real price contrast is a different thing as well, though.
Oh yeah, well, and that always drives me crazy when they get it, because they all use the same formula. They always, pitching from the stage has become something I've minimal respect for, which is not nice to say, and I feel like there's some good people out there who do pitches from the stage, but there's so many people out there that do these just over the top cheesy. And the thing is, I'm not totally sure how, but there's some like BS meter that goes off in our head that we can tell when it's not legit. So they're sitting there and they're listing it out. You would normally have to buy this for $597. $597. You would normally have to buy this for this for this, this for this. And you can almost tell, like, yeah, they don't actually sell it for that. Like, I'm not, so they're sitting here saying you're saving $6,000, but the reality is you would never buy any of these things alone. So doesn't really matter because I'm not saving that much money. And 2, are they actually selling it for $597, or is it a price point? Because I can sit here and be like, oh yeah, my one-on-one coaching, $25,000 an hour. Oh yeah, I can say that all I want. I can put that on the website. Sure. But if no one's gonna buy it, like,
Well, I guess you only need one person to buy it at that price for it to be true.
Well,
but yeah, if that's if that's not actually what you've ever sold it for, then of course not. But that's your own ethics and integrity. But this on a bigger scale, that this is maybe where the sort of sleazy image of sales comes from, of people thinking it's just people using formulas and conning people, tricking people into making sales that they might not otherwise buy. But we're just talking about maybe being a bit more elegant, but also, what you're saying is like more with elegance, more with integrity, that you can still influence in nice ways, but you're not not pushing, you're just presenting things in the best way that is going to be most appealing to the people who you want to target, giving them something that they actually want. And that makes perfect sense. This is where I think sales training, this is what all sales training should probably be like.
I agree. I wish more people would do this, but and it is interesting because I have had people who have come up to me. So our big event every year is the Grow Retreat. We spent all year putting this event on. We're adding another big one this year, but up until now, the Grow Retreat is our big one. It is 75 seats, extremely exclusive. Like everyone has to interview in order to attend. There is no pitching rule. Like there's a hard no pitching rule. And I've had people who said, Steph, you really should do a pitch for the next year from the stage. And I said, look, here's what we do. On day 2, we get these really, really nice quality invitation cards, almost like a save the date for a wedding type of card. And we put them in everyone's seat. And then we announce in the morning, heads up, if you do want to register to come back next year, the form is in your sheet. You can look at the pricing in there. We think you're adults. We understand, like, you can make your own decisions. We're not going to sit here and browbeat you with it. So we don't even mention it. We just say your form is in your folder. Just turn it in before you leave. If you do, these are the 2 or 3 bonuses that are only active on site. Once you walk out that door, they're expired. So, and Steph is hardcore about this. You guys know her. Don't walk out the door and call her on Monday and try and do this. She won't go for it. So, and that's it. We mention it at the end of the day. We say, by the way, please come back, join us next year. Please keep in mind, if you walk out, those 3 bonuses will not be active. We put little signs up on the doors. That's it. There's no, like, I went to an event where, the person spent 4 hours pitching for her next event. And I was just sitting in the room going, seriously? Like, we're adults. We can make a decision. Like, she gave us all the information the day prior, and then she spent 4 hours pitching the next day. And I was like, we can make decisions on our own. We don't need this level. And I think that's the issue. A lot of people sit there and they're like, well, people can't make decisions on their own. I'm like,
they can.
Yeah, they can. Build your influence skills so that you can help influence them. You can help them understand and feel comfortable, because that's the biggest thing. People don't make decisions when they feel uncomfortable. And so if you can use your skills to help people feel comfortable with the decision, they'll make the decision they would naturally make. They'll make the decision to work with you or not, based on whether or not it's actually a fit for them. And you'll have a lot more fun working with the people who actually choose to buy from you. Ta-da!
And you're expressing yourself in a way that fits with who you are, with your values, right? And that's an important part. And a part that I wanted to come to as well is that about the values in business, because we've touched on some of the sort of ethical or unethical sides of things a little bit, but actually how people then go and express their values. So, the word choice and speech patterns are a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's more as well. There's more of like understanding what your values are and how they get expressed within what you do in your business, right?
Yeah. Well, so if you think about, and this is something I encourage every sales rep, every business owner to know, every person, you should know what your personal core values are, or Mike Michalowicz calls them your immutable laws. These are the characteristics that you live your life by. And you not only, this can't just be a list of words. Like I always joke, right? Every business out there has integrity, honesty, and justice for all, like type of core values, which mean nothing.
Right.
And so I'm like, if you're going to choose integrity, that's cool. But if you're going to have integrity be one of your core values, I want you to be able to walk me through why it matters to you, a time when someone didn't have integrity, and why that's seared into your brain, and what your definition of integrity is in 1 to 2 sentences. And when you get that kind of clarity around what are your core values, what are your immutable laws, what matters to you, what's your North Star, what I find is it comes out in everything you do and everything you say. You find ways to portray that. And I think, me personally, I think this is where we get that BS meter from, is our core values. Something, when you understand what matters to you, when a warning light goes off, you can sit there and go, I don't feel like this person is acting with integrity or with, passion or, whatever their core values are. They can actually put it into words. I'm not comfortable moving forward because I don't feel like this person has this core value. And so I think it's really important because it creates a, we talk about gut instinct, follow your gut. And there's actually a neural mass around your gut that is larger than the neural mass in your brain. And so you actually have gut instinct, and you can fine tune that a little bit by understanding what your core values are, and you will communicate those to people, and you will understand if they're communicating them back. And it's not necessarily, it's not always about word choice. It's not always about speech patterns. Sometimes it is both, and how they come together or don't, that either shows you that you're in alignment and you want to move forward with this person, or you're not, and you need to part ways. You need to move on.
I think we do often get, we probably call it an intuitive sense about whether people are being true to themselves, whether they're in their integrity or not, because we do get a sense of people. Now, I know when I first started learning when I first signed up for NLP trainings, that was sort of it was a production. I mean, really, I go back now, not saying this too much critically because it was also great. It was a great experience, but it was very much a production. But I know that the person leading that production was also acting rather than living that. And I think maybe I did have some kind of sense of they had really bigged up their energy for this, and that they weren't necessarily the same off the stage as they were on the stage. Yeah. And so you're portraying one thing but living another. And the more I got involved with that particular company, the more I found that was actually the case. Whereas now I have a lot of business association, have done for the last 10 years or so with T. Harv Eker. I think I've mentioned to you before when we spoke. And so Harv just is a good example of somebody who, he'll go and he will do a great show. He doesn't really do much now. He's pretty much mostly retired. But when he's up there speaking, he is that same person. That is, now I know him off the stage as well as on the stage, that he's true to himself. And yeah, you really get that. And that there are sometimes where I've heard him say things and say, I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't go there, that's too vulnerable, or that's a bit, I'm not sure about that. But he really goes there, that personal thing, because that's where his heart's at. It's not this completely sort of, everything is censored and stuck to a specific script. Yes, it follows a planned schedule, but he will put in whatever's in his heart or whatever comes up for him to say as well. Sometimes sharing stories that you might think, I'm not sure I would have shared that, but you get where it's coming from. And then if you are one of those people who gets to know him off there, like, well, yeah, okay, he's kind of true to that as well. And that for me means, I love working with people who have high integrity, but I love people who are, I see a part of integrity as being true to your values, as being true to who you really are. And living that in as many parts of your life as you can. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can't turn up your energy when you need to for a talk, but that you still stay within some kind of boundaries of who you actually are as a person and what you stand for. And so I work very much, and I hope I do live that myself in my own values and my own talks. And but you know, it's good to sometimes know that there are those people out there. Not everyone out there is trying to scam you. It's like there are a lot of people out there who are who are really genuine and are actually very good at the sales stuff, and sometimes will be a bit high energy, or maybe will do things that you don't expect, or might make you laugh, or might make you question. And that's great. That's how life should be.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, there's this whole thing out there, you know, fake it till you make it type of thing.
Yeah.
That I so disagree with. You know, you can't fake it, because if you fake it till you make it, the problem is, you know, then that becomes who you are, a fake person. Right. And now you have to live this. And I tried to do that for years because I was always worried about, you know, I know public figures often talk about how difficult it can be to be a public figure and to have a personal life. And so for, you know, a few years, I tried really hard to separate the two. And what I just found was it just created two Stephanies, and nobody knew who they were getting when Stephanie showed up. So it created confusion. And I just decided, you know, and it was so much energy to try and be, you know, the public figure Stephanie and then the Stephanie. And I was just like, okay, this is it. I'm done. I'm just going to be me. And people are either going to gravitate towards it or they're not, right? Because the public figure Stephanie was like this carefully curated, cultivated person that wouldn't offend anybody, wouldn't upset anybody, you know. And you know, the true Stephanie, sometimes I say stuff wrong, and sometimes I offend people, and sometimes it comes out of my mouth too quickly, and sometimes you know, words pop out of my mouth that podcasters go, "Ooh, we don't say that on this podcast." But you know, once I started to embrace that side of me, one, it made my life a lot easier because there was no more sitting there and being like, okay, I gotta be the public figure. It was just like, I'm just Stephanie. Like, I'm just gonna show up and be me. And yeah, sometimes I'm high energy, sometimes I'm low energy. You know, that's part of who I am, but I'm authentically me all the way through.
You're not trying to just live this image or perception of who you are. You're living as a real person. And I do think that's where some people struggle. And I think a lot, you know, especially in what is really generally a very celebrity obsessed culture now, that we do still have people that, well, someone puts a foot out of line, as it were. There are obvious exceptions to this, but generally, when someone puts a foot out of line or does something they shouldn't do, it's all over the papers. It's all in the news headlines, and this is people's personal lives being treated as news as well. And also that thing of, well, they have this certain image, and then they don't live up to that in some way because they're flawed human beings, the same as the rest of us. People suddenly change their opinion of them, or they suddenly rally against them, and it just because they did something or said something that wasn't quite what they wanted them to be. They didn't fit with the groupthink, or didn't fit with the perception, the image that everyone wants to have of them, because ultimately they are human. They're not these perfect, infallible beings that are living that perfect lifestyle and image that you see, because nobody can. That's too much pressure for anybody. So the authenticity thing is super important, but it is liberating, right? To make that decision of, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have everybody like me. It's okay if I sometimes slip up and say the wrong thing, and a few people get offended or come and complain or troll me online or whatever ends up happening. So it's okay. That's going to happen. It's life, and these things are to be expected. I would far rather get out there with a message and impact people who are going to relate to that and like what I have to say and learn something from it, than to try and connect with everybody and suppress who I really am in order to do that.
Yeah, because sooner or later, if you do that, like you said, sooner or later the real you comes out, and now you lose a whole bunch of fans because they weren't connected to who you really are, right? So being who you are, and this is, I mean, I know we're talking public figure wise, but this is in sales, this is in business, this is in life. You know, having two sides of who you are makes it difficult to create real connection with people. across the board. And I know there's some people who are like, well, but Stephanie, but I'm so introverted that, I need to be a different person in order, because otherwise I just wouldn't talk to people. And I'm like, well, then find the side of you. First of all, there are a lot of highly successful introverts out there. So there's no way that, you can't do this, but find the way that you can be out there with people and connect with people in a way that is still authentic to you. Right. And then, you give yourself space to go home and be alone and read your book in the dark. And it's cool. Like, that's fine. But you still got to go out there and be you. And you got to be you in your sales appointments. You got to be you in your meetings with your employees. You got to be you in your meetings with your team, your vendors, your customers, your friends, your networking events, on stage, off stage, on video. You got to be you, who you are. And when you own it, it's so freeing to just be able to say, this is who I am, and I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a super important message that I hope more and more people get. Of course, if some of the feedback starts to come back that who you are is a complete asshole, you might want to make some adjustments in your life.
Right. Yeah, that one you might, I do not recommend. And this is definitely not a license to be like, well, this is who I am. Like, I get to run over people. Like, no. Your rights end where mine begin, right? You can't express your right over my life. So you don't get to be like, that's cool. But I'm not going to let you run me over. And right. If you are finding people are running away, everyone's running away from you, you might look around and have a really hard, and you know what? I would recommend at that point, you probably go work with a coach or a therapist or someone who can help you kind of dissect out who you are and, what parts of you don't like and you would like to change. Because that's, there's going to be parts of you and sides of you that you don't want to change. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm really difficult to work for. I'm very, very demanding. I have high standards, and yet my team loves me. So there's parts of me I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change my high standards for my team. Sure. I'm not going to change sending something back if I don't think it was up to quality, right? I'm not going to change any of that. But that's not all of who I am, right? I've made sure that I removed the side of me that only expected perfection. I kept the side that wanted the high quality, right? And I can still be difficult to work for, but my team, they're like, you know what, Steph, I would rather you called me out on it than you got upset about it and didn't say anything. And so, I think that's a good example of could be an asshole. But because I've worked to take out the parts that are just all asshole and insert some, nicer parts too, it works. And it works for me, and it allows me to own who I am.
Yeah.
But I did
authentic conversations, right?
Right.
But we all have to learn to have those authentic conversations in ways that aren't just a bull in a china shop, that we tread in a way that isn't just going to put people's defenses up as well, or have them feeling so bad about themselves that they're going home to cry and think, I'm never going to work there again. Right. So it is part of, it's not just for ourselves to hopefully be a bit nicer and improve ourselves in those situations, but also because the message gets received in better ways, the way that you would hopefully want it to be taken of. We can take this on board, but not take it as I hate you because of this, or that this is no, your life is over because you can't do this one thing. It's really right. Just, I want you to take some feedback here. I want you to grow, and it is sometimes getting people that understand. I guess it is moving people from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset, really, isn't it? This isn't taking anything away from you. This is hopefully helping you to grow more and grow bigger. And I think that maybe is part of getting it for yourself as well, of understanding that when you really understand that the fixed mindset is one where criticism or negativity is taking something away from you, it means you're not good enough. Whereas the growth mentality means those things will happen are an opportunity for expansion, an opportunity for you to learn from that and become better and bigger because of those experiences. One is a downward spiral, and the other is an upward spiral.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree, and that's such. I feel like that's just such a great example of, yeah, it's something that you could be an asshole, right? You could be perceived as, or you can take the same conversation, make some subtle tweaks to how you deliver your speech patterns, your word choice, and you can transform the entire conversation. And, and it just comes down to you being that authentic you, being who you know you want to be, who you know you need to be.
Yeah.
And owning it and learning the patterns of influence.
There's such useful skills to have for many reasons, and I feel like, no, I definitely want to be respectful of your times. I want to draw things to a close, but I feel like we could talk for hours and it would just be so fascinating. But I think this is actually kind of a nice point to start to draw things to a close on, because we've talked about some really nice things, and I think there is a lot of value in what we've talked about today as well. A lot of things to learn, and as you said, don't try and make changes, all the changes all at once. Just start with a bit of it. And if this is all new to you, take the bit that you most need and do some work with that, and then the other stuff will come from that as well. I am sure some of the watchers, listeners, are going to want to know more about you or how they could get in contact with you. So please tell us, how can people get in touch with you?
Best thing to do would be to go to my company's website, growdisrupt.com. You can go to my website, my public figure site, thestephaniescheller.com, like the one and only Stephanie Scheller, but just the Stephanie Scheller. And if you reach out on either of those sites, my team is really, really good. They'll get you to me within 24 hours. You can also find me. I'm a Facebook addict, so I'm there all the time. And if you check me out there, you're welcome to send me a friend request or just follow me on there, posting regularly. If you do send me a friend request, just be like, hey, I found you on the podcast, so that I know to accept your friend request, because otherwise I get random ones that look really weird and I don't usually accept.
Yeah, I get a lot of those as well. And so you have your own podcast as well. So just remind the audience how they can check out your podcast.
So our podcast is Black Belt Selling. So I do it with my mother. We're a mother-daughter team doing the podcast. And so they can check that out if you go to growdisrupt.com and click on resources. And then down towards the bottom of the page, there is the links to Black Belt Selling.
Your mother must be very different to mine. I can't imagine having my mother on a podcast. It would be chaos.
Oh my God. My mom she is smart. We have a lot of fun together. People always laugh. She actually emceed our event, our big event a couple weeks ago. And I just got so much feedback. People were like, oh my gosh, Steph, you two on stage together, you're precious. You two are hilarious. Like, you two would get on stage. They were some of the funniest moments of the whole event. And I was just laughing. I was like,
I have a whole stand-up comedy routine about things my mum says. So I guess that could be funny on a podcast, right? But great. I love it that you did a podcast with your mum. So Black Belt Selling, people can come and check that out. But you also have a few best-selling books. So give us a little taste of those, and make sure that the links are in the description for people as well.
So we have, my first book was Friend Power, How the Friends You Choose Can Change the Course of Your Life. And I wrote this book because I was realizing how important the friends you have and the friends you choose are to influencing where you end up everywhere, in every aspect, to your religious stances, your, family life, your everything. And I wanted a book not just about the unconscious influence your friends are having on you, but also what to do about it. Because a lot of us, there was a stage when I had friends who were, and even now I'll still find people in my circle that are not great, that I don't really want to hang out with. And so I wrote, the first portion of the book is all about how are these guys influencing you. The second portion of the book is about, okay, so what do you do once you realize you've got some people in your life that are not great for you? What do you do about it? How do you take ownership? How do you take control without burning bridges, without sitting there and, you don't have to call someone up and be like, I don't like you anymore. We're done. Like, you don't have to do that. So I walked you through that. And then my second book was Getting Past the Gatekeeper. We did this one just as like a pocket-sized manual. And it's all about how do you get past the gatekeeper in sales, the secretary or the wife that doesn't want to let you talk to the husband. And that one came from, when I was in sales originally, I hated the gatekeeper. I would always complain about the gatekeeper and those darn gatekeepers, if they would just get out of my way. And couple of years into running the sales training practice, one of my clients was complaining to me about gatekeepers and how much of a pain in the butt they are. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, I don't have problems with gatekeepers anymore. And he was like, what do you do? And I was like, I don't
People
know.
want to know.
Right. So I sat down and I actually tried to figure out, what do I do to get past the gatekeeper? And it ended up turning into a whole book.
Great. Well, they both sound like a lot of value, and we'll have links to those in the descriptions for anyone who would like to go and check them out. Highly recommended. I'll be taking a look myself. I want to know more, especially the friend power. And I have a feeling that people are going to like this podcast a lot, and that they'll enjoy it. It's been a lot of fun speaking with you, and so hopefully maybe at some point again in the future we can come together and maybe do another podcast another time for some of the audience a bit further down the line. But that would be wonderful. But for now, it has been a really wonderful experience. Let me just finish by saying, is there anything I should have asked you or that you wish I'd asked you that I didn't?
Oh man, I don't think so. I mean, we really covered a lot of ground here. I had a lot of fun with this podcast. I think people will enjoy it too. I think we covered a lot of stuff that I don't think gets talked about as much. And that's really, really cool. So thank you for giving me the platform.
Thank you. And I say, I would love to have you back as a guest again in the future for sure. And if you ever like me as a guest on your podcast, I would be very happy to do that. That would be interesting. And of course, meet your mum perhaps. But,
right.
but for now, you've given so much value, and really it has been a lot of fun and a great call and a great, fantastic podcast. So thank you, Stephanie, so much for that. So remember, check out Stephanie Scheller. Go and take a look at her books and her podcast and her website. And I hope everyone listening has enjoyed this and has got at least one thing that they can take away from this podcast and do something with. It's like, it's all good and well just listening, but you have to put stuff into action as well. Otherwise it's all going on in your head and not in the real world. Let's make stuff happen in the real world and make this make the sales world a better place and make all the world a better place. Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.